In this note on negative emotions from Maurice Nicoll's Commentaries, we have deep psychological insight into our own lives, if only we observe that going on in our internal world, and also several practical aspects that we can bring into our daily lives. And so we will read the note on negative emotions in one moment, but I just want to give a brief commentary. I think because this is such a important aspect of the work, I'm going to do a fuller commentary video on this commentary. But just to begin, Maurice Nicoll speaks about where are we in ourselves? Are we at a lower level? Are we identified negative emotions, internal considering? Or are we in a higher place in ourselves, in a sense, when we observe these things, when we overcome them? And there are two fantastic phrases that I'm going to share with you before we get into the letters, so you can see them when they come up. But it's a very subtle but distinct, different bit of language. It's two very similar sentences, and I'm going to share them with you so you have a chance to think about them. Before we begin, and it says, now the work says you have a right not to be negative. It does not say you have no right to be negative. So I'll put that on the screen so you can see it very clearly. The work says you have a right not to be negative. It does not say you have no right to be negative. And when you've been in this work for some time, when you've studied the canonical text, when you've observed yourself at a deeper than surface level, you've seen some of these things, you've seen the work colleague that evokes a mechanical negative response, you've noticed that when your partner does something that evokes a mechanical negative emotion, when someone doesn't give you enough praise for something that you've done in the workplace, that evokes a mechanical negative response. All of these by way of example of the first key is to see the negative emotion in ourselves. If we're just off all day spouting negativity everywhere we go, and we never visualize and observe that in ourselves, then how will we know to change? In Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step is to say and admit, I am an alcoholic. And so if we had a negativity anonymous circle, we could say, I have negative emotions. And of course, we all do. There's a subtle scale from the always negative to the never negative. And that's a sliding scale. But the first thing is to observe these things. What happens in life to make me express negative emotions, and what eyes are active when this occurs? So we will now read the note from Maurice Nicoll, and maybe tomorrow or the next day I will upload a further and deeper commentary with some more practical things for you to bring into your line of work. Enjoy. Note on negative emotions. Birdlip, August 15th, 1942. Let us speak tonight of the work. Let us speak of what work on oneself means in connection with negative emotions. The work says you have a right not to be negative. Notice that the work does not say you have no right to be negative. One of the signs whereby you can distinguish between a false and a true teaching is that a false teaching insists upon or makes a rule about your doing something you cannot do. It is the sign of a false teaching, for example, to make you promise something or swear to it or take an oath of silence and so on. A man, an ordinary man, cannot keep a promise under all circumstances because he is not one person but many persons. One person, one I in him, may promise or even bind itself by an oath, but other I's in him will know nothing about this. To assume that a man can promise is to assume that he is already one, a unity, that is, a man having only one real, permanent I controlling him, and so only one will. But a man has many I's and as many different wills. Suppose the work made a rule to this effect. You must not be negative, you must swear never to be negative. If you break this promise, you must leave the work. If the work said that, it would mean that it took it for granted that man can do. But the work says that man as he is cannot do, and that this is one of the things you have to become aware of through self-observation. If you still imagine you can do, if you still think you can always remember and keep your aim, then you will make no room for the work in yourself, and the work will not be able to help you. You will not feel your inner helplessness. If you begin to feel your inner helplessness in a right way, you will feel the need of the work to help you. How can the work help you? It can help you only if you begin to obey it. To feel the need of the work is to feel you need something to guide you. If you are going to let something guide you, you must obey it. You must try to obey the work. Of course, if you understand nothing, you cannot obey the work. So you have to think what it is that the work teaches and get it clearly into your mind. You have to think, you yourself, in your most private and real thoughts, what this work is saying to you all the time. If you have thought in this deeper, intimate, private way, you will see that the work tells you more about what not to do than about what to do. Now, people often ask, what am I to do? On that side, the work says only two definite things. Remember yourself and observe or notice yourself. That is what you must try to do. But on the other side, the work says many things about what you must not do. It says, for example, that you must try to struggle against being identified. Try to struggle with mechanicalness, with mechanical and wrong talking, with every kind of internal considering, with every kind of self-justifying, with all the different pictures of yourself, with your special forms of imagination, with mechanical disliking, with all varieties of your self-pity and self-esteem, with your jealousy, with your hatreds, with your vanity, your inner falseness, with your lying, with your self-conceit, with your attitudes, prejudices, and so on. And it expressly speaks of struggling with your negative emotions taken as a whole. Sometimes you meet a person in the work who is very eager and wishes to know exactly what to do. It is especially people who only have external attention and no internal attention who ask this. As you know, the work begins with internal attention. Self-observation is internal attention. A person must begin to see for himself what he is like and what goes on in him. For example, he must begin to see through internal attention his own negative emotions instead of only seeing other people's with his external attention. He must see what it means to identify with his negative emotions and what it means not to identify with them. Once he sees this, he has got a key to the work on the practical side in his hands. The first stages of the work are sometimes called cleaning the machine. A person who constantly says, "What should I do?" after hearing the practical teaching of the work over and over again is like a man who has a garden full of weeds and says eagerly, "What should I plant in it? What should I grow in it?" He must first clean the garden. So the work lays great emphasis on what not to do, that is, on what must be stopped, what must no longer be indulged in, what is to be prevented, what is no longer to be nourished, what must be cleaned away from the human machine. For none of us have nice, new machines when we enter this work, but rusty, dirty machines that need a daily and indeed a lifelong cleaning to begin with. And one of the greatest forms of dirt is negative emotions and habitual indulgence in them. The greatest filth in a man is negative emotion. An habitually negative person is a filthy person in the work sense. A person who is always thinking unpleasant things about others, saying unpleasant things, disliking everyone, being jealous, always having some grievance or some form of self-pity, always feeling that he or she is not rightly treated, and so on. Such a person has a filthy mind in the most real and practical sense, because all these things are forms of negative emotion, and all negative emotions are dirt. Now, the work says you have a right not to be negative. As was pointed out, it does not say you have no right to be negative. If you will think of the difference, you will see how great it is. To feel that you have a right not to be negative means that you are well on your way to real inner work on yourself in regard to negative states. To be able to feel this draws down force to help you. You stand upright, as it were, in yourself among all the mess of your negativeness, and you feel and know that it is not necessary to lie down in that mess. To say this phrase in the right way to yourself, to feel the meaning of the words, I have a right not to be negative, is actually a form of self-remembering, of feeling a trace of real I that lifts you up above the level of your negative eyes, which are all the time telling you without a pause that you have every right to be negative. Part 2. You have all heard of levels, but some may not understand what a higher level means in a practical sense. What is a lower and what is a higher level in yourself? The work is to make us live on a higher level of ourselves. For example, suppose you begin to internally consider. You start making accounts, making out that others owe you, thinking that you are badly treated, worrying about what others think of you, and so on. This is an activity of a lower level of yourself. That is, you cannot live on a better level of yourself if you are going to indulge all the time in internal considering. Now, suppose you begin to dislike the inner taste of considering. Then, when internal considering starts in you and you notice it, you will feel uncomfortable. Why? Because you have already begun to feel what a higher level is like. You feel uncomfortable by reason of the contrast. You have seen something better. You are now in a position to make an inner choice. Or again, if you are in a negative state, are you on a lower or higher level of yourself? You are on a lower level, and you will not be able to taste what a high level is like as long as you indulge unchecked in your negative states. It is always a question of inner decision, of inner choice. If you begin to be interested in your better states and study what spoils them, you will begin to work practically on yourself. Better states belong to higher levels of yourself. They are in you as different levels. You can live in the basement or higher up, but you have to see all this for yourself and get to know where you are in yourself. Ask yourself, where am I? With what thoughts and emotions are you going? With what moods? With what eyes? One has to learn not only whom to live with in oneself, but where to live in oneself. One note more. In dealing with a negative state, look at the I in you and not at the person with whom you are negative. The real cause of the negative state is the I that is speaking in you and to which you are listening. If you let this I go on talking and listen to it, you will become more and more negative. Its only object is to make you negative and absorb as much of your force as it can. Every negative I has only one purpose, to get hold of you and feed upon you and strengthen itself at your expense. The real cause of negative states is in yourself, in negative eyes that live only to persuade you with their half-truths and lies, and to rule over you and spoil your lives. All negative eyes only wish to destroy you, to ruin your lives. This is a very good exercise to practice.